Hey everyone, so I'll go ahead and get things started here. Thanks for anyone that is tuning in to watch me unbox my copy here of Votes for Women, published by um, Fort Circle Games, and I will say they were kind enough to send Talking Cardboard a copy of this game for this well, to start with an unboxing and obviously do some playthroughs of this game soon. Now, I am a big solo co-op game, and this game definitely is designed with rules in mind for the solo and co-op player. So that's a big part of the reason why I was excited to get this game. But also, it's very educational. It's, as the title suggests, about the women suffrage movement in the United States. And I'll be honest, I honestly don't know a lot about that period of our country's history. I don't know a lot about our country's history in general. So this is, um, I know for me will be a great learning experience to better understand what the effort for women to actually have the right to vote in the United States, what that effort was like, and um, the key women involved in, and I'm sure there were men too, of course, involved in that effort. So, in Fort Circle in general, it is a publishing company that I pretty much think I don't want to say this as a fact, but I believe that they pretty much exclusively do historical themed board games that are educational in nature. So this game can be played from 1 to 4 players, and as in the box says, takes 60 to 90 minutes, ages 14 and up. Although you probably could go a little younger than that if you're playing cooperatively, since of course you're all on the same team. One thing I immediately want to point out is the fact that um, the in terms of like how to play this game, um, Rodney Smith, not surprisingly, already has a really solid YouTube video. So I'm not going to explain all the nitty gritty details of how to play this game in this live unboxing. But if you're watching this at a later time, definitely feel free to go over to Rodney's channel to watch the how to play video on Votes for Women, because he does a really good job of explaining um, how the game works. So with that said, I'll start taking off the shrink wrap. Just to prove to you guys this is a legitimate unboxing, that I have not already taken a look at this game yet. With that said, I have received criticism in the past for my unboxings because I have zero idea what I'm opening. So I did do a little bit of an investigation as to, I watched Rodney Smith's video, I should say, on how to play the game. So I have a little bit of an understanding of how this game works. And one thing I already noticed, that I appreciate the art style. It obviously has a what's the word, kind of aged look to it, but the period of the setting, of course, is 1848 to 1920. So I think the artwork fits the style, the theme of the game itself. And I should also say that it's very possible the artwork does come from some historical sources, so there could be reason why the artwork is the way it is in that regard. But also something that I'll point out here is, now that I've taken the lid off, there's a lot of these on the sides, historical images of I'm sure many different important important events during the suffrage movement. So immediately you can see a bunch of components come with this game, and also a lot of cards. I would summarize the gameplay of Votes for Women. It's very similar to that of the game Twilight Struggle, if you have any familiar with that game. In that it's got a little bit of this area control aspect to it, because essentially there's 2 sides in this game. There's the suffragist side, that is the side that's trying to, of course, influence the government to allow women the right to vote. and basically to propose the 19th amendment and make sure it gets passed. And then there's what they just call the opposition side, and that's the side that's trying to prevent that from happening. Essentially, the rules, go leave it at that. They really, I think, and purposely try to keep this game apolitical to an extent. They don't like describe political parties in terms of which pieces represent what. So they just have purple and yellow cubes that represent the suffragist side, and then the red cubes representing the opposition side. So, with that said, I took out all the paperwork. So, we'll start with the rules of the game here. In terms of number of pages, it's only an 11-page rule book. So, the complexity of this game, I wouldn't call it a light game. I'd say it's a relatively speaking, it's really hard to characterize the weight of games these days. I would say it's closer to medium. But again, that the Rodney Smith video, which was 20 minutes, does a good job of explaining everything. So do with that information what you will. At the end of the day, it's only an 11-page rule book. So I'm sure many people would say that's on the lighter end of the spectrum. And as I think I've maybe mentioned already, it can be played from 1 to 4 players, and also then includes rules to play, of course, solo, but also cooperatively. And something that, not surprisingly, the Rodney Smith How to Play video didn't go into detail on. So I don't know myself a lot about it, but there's the OOB Bot, which is the AI system in this game that allows you then to play solo and co-op. So, but that's the rule book. Not a ton of pictures explaining gameplay, which I don't know if it's necessary or not. That's something I notice a lot of times. Of course, when rule books will contain graphics of what the rules are trying to explain, and this game doesn't really have diagrams. So, but anyway, that's that. Now we have what's called the historical supplement and designer notes. And this goes into what I was saying earlier, that this game is designed as much to be an educational tool as it is to be a gameplay experience. I think that's great. I really appreciate board games that have that kind of design philosophy integrated into them. And that's something that I always like to mention for GMT games, for example. They always have these playbooks that go into a lot of detail for the goes into a lot of detail as to the historical background for the given game that you're playing. With that said, this game, of course, does that as well. So I find that, I don't know, that's really cool. Sorry, for the distraction there. I was checking making sure my stream was working properly. I think it is. So in terms of I'm not going to obviously read through all of this, but it does provide a lot of context to the movement of the suffrage movement in the United States, and it kind of goes into detail for a bunch of these historical documents, which this game also then comes with copies of, which I think is also very cool and interesting. I've never seen a game go to this extent in terms of trying to provide educational materials. And I would immediately say that I hope I'm sure this maybe is already happening. So, but I do hope that this is a type of game that people will try to introduce into school or classrooms as a teaching tool for this part of our history. Of course, in parallel with the curriculum. Whenever this gets touched on in history class, I'm not sure which grade. I myself probably learned about women's right to vote in the United States in the 19th Amendments, but regardless, this is a great teaching tool, I think, for a classroom environment. And then also even like in a library setting, to have a game like this on a library shelf. Obviously, it comes down to funding. I'm well aware that it's not just simple for teachers and to have access to these types of games. So that therefore I'm also kind of encouraging any organizations out there to try to provide copies of these games to schools and libraries so that young kids can have access to a high quality hobby board game while also learn about an important part of our history. So anyway, there's all these documents that are of course replicas of all sorts of different related to all sorts of aspects of the suffrage movement. Here we have like letters, it looks like. I'm not going to pretend I know. Obviously what's nice is the game comes with this historical supplement that explains what all these documents are, so I'll do that at a separate time, but there's a lot of them included in the game, so I feel like that's a really cool aspect. Okay, now let's turn to the actual gameplay components themselves, and I'll start with let's just start with the dice, since they're right here. Now, throughout the course of the game, you will be doing various dice checks, and there's, as you can see, all sorts of, there's 6-sided die, 8-sided die, and then I don't even know how many sides this one is. I'm not going to try to count them, but it's more than 8 sides, and depending on various actions and that you're trying to do in the game, you'll be rolling these dice. They're in the game, and I'm trying to I'm blanking on this specific use case of when you would be actually rolling the die, but anyway, so typically there's these cards that are going to be telling you, hey, roll a die and see what happens, and then you would do just that. Okay, so opening up this bag of bags, let's start digging through all these pieces. Let's start with the meeples, we'll call them, which are the campaigners. So these are kind of, I don't know if I would say they represent, well, yeah, you could argue that these represent actual individuals or groups of individuals that either were representing the suffragist movement or the opposition movement. And I almost want to jump ahead to the board because that'll help me kind of explain the purpose of the campaigners. But in short, you'll have campaigners stationed in the various regions of the United States, which there are. I like the crisp nature of the board too. That it's, again, it looks outdated, but that's of course in line with the rest of the aesthetic of this game, and kind of gives me that Splotter almost. I think it looks better than Splotter aesthetics, but it has that vibe to it in my mind. But regardless, these campaigners are going to be stationed in the various regions of the board, and yeah, during the course of the game, you do want to have these campaigners out as much as possible, because then they essentially are helping you gain political momentum in that part of the board and allowing you then to add the cubes. So that I'll touch on. Oh yeah, I guess I'll show close. So give you a close-up of so this is like one of the opposition meeples. Looks like some dude in a top hat shaking his fist. And then you have the purple and yellow. And there's a couple different shapes of the, we'll call them the suffragist campaigners. But whether they have a flag or don't have a flag, I don't think has any gameplay impact. So that's the campaigners. And I'll just, to kind of keep things as clean as possible, put these back in the bag before I move on to the cubes. But then we have the cubes here. So there's 3 different colors of cubes, and the colors kind of align to the campaigner colors. So you have purple cubes and yellow cubes representing the suffragist supporters, and then you have the red or orange cubes representing the opposition. Now, I don't, gameplay wise or thematic wise, why there's 2 colors. Part of it's, I think, just from a mechanic perspective, that they wanted to have 2 colors of suffragist pieces. But I do think it's kind of, in a sense, representing bipartisanship. That, in my mind, that's how I at least digest this, is that you have purple campaigners, purple cubes maybe representing one political party, and the yellow cubes, yellow campaigners representing the other political party, and yet they're in the game, as they're all suffragists, so they're all working together, but the game kind of tries to maybe simulate the fact that there was some bipartisanship involved during the time. Again, that's my interpretation of why there's 2 colors. I'm sure that could be wrong, or that's not maybe what the designer was trying to illustrate. The rules, I don't think, specifically say that either, but thematically, that's at least what I'm how I interpret why there's 2 different colors. So nothing special about these wooden cubes. I'm not going to bother pulling them out of their bag, but well, just to illustrate that eventually you're going to want to start putting these cubes out on the board, and once you want to try to get at least 4 in a state of your color, of your side, I should say. The suffragist player gets to count their colors together. So in this case, the suffragist player has 4. And once you have 4, that basically means that state, you've secured that state to basically vote on your side. So if this state would have basically be supporting the suffragist side, and they would vote basically in favor of the 19th Amendment, and then you'll have states that will have 4 or more cubes of the opposition side in a state like let's say Minnesota, where I'm from. We maybe won't say Minnesota. We'll say North Dakota. North Dakota has 4 or more opposition cubes, so that state's going to say no to the 19th Amendment once the voting starts taking place. And there's a part of the game where that happens. Right now, before the actual, you'll eventually have these check marks and X's come out onto the board, and at that point, that's when states basically become locked in as to what they will be voting. But during the course of the game, then you're going to be taking actions to try and place your cubes on the states, and you work together with your campaigners to influence the amount of cubes you're putting out, that sort of thing. So anyway, that's the cubes. I'll move on now to the checks and X's. So these will eventually be used, or coming out on the board, to illustrate what states are voting what way. And this is not by any means is based on history on how I'm doing this, so please don't come at me in the comments. But essentially, the green checks will say good, that those are states that are voting in favor of the 19th Amendment, and then the red X's are states that said no to the 19th Amendment, and but those will come into play, I think, typically later in the game. Okay, so then the next group of pieces I want to talk about are these, which are called they're called the congressional markers. So these are called the congressional markers, and nothing in terms of appearance. It looks kind of like a column. I'm not actually sure if it's supposed to physically represent anything specific, or it's just a unique shape they went with for this component. But as the suffragist player, it's imperative that you get 6 of these out on the board. And these basically are used to simulate the amount of political influence, specifically in Capitol Hill, I think is the way I interpret this part of the game, to actually bring forth the amendment for a vote. So this is step 1 for the suffragist players. You need to get all 6 of these out onto the board here, because then at that point you can actually start voting, and then you start then it matters what cubes you have on the states. But if you never get, like, if you're only ever to here, it doesn't matter. I don't, as far as I understand, how many cubes you have on all the states as the suffragist player, because you're not even going to get a chance to vote to vote. So yeah, so that's what these represent. Then you have these two black. Well, this game does a great job of giving a lot of extra components. So I think you really only need one. But a black disc here that just represents the turn counter, turn marker, turn track. So as you can see on the board, you can't see it now. As you can see on the board, there's 6 turns in the game. So basically, the suffragist player needs to secure the 19th Amendment by the 6th round, by the end of the 6th round. Otherwise, they lose. So the opposition is just trying to delay that, either delay it by, preventing the suffragist player from even getting to the point where they can vote, or by trying to prevent, I think it's 39 states from being green check marks. 36 states. It's 36 states that the suffragist player needs. So essentially, the opposition's kind of, let's say, is playing in defense in this game, and the suffragist movement's more of an offensive side or faction. So anyway, those are all the hard components in the game. Then there are some cardboard counters here. These are called, let me see what the game term is for them. These are called the suffragist buttons and opposition buttons. So there's 4, let's say, styles of suffragist buttons, and then there's 2 styles of the opposition buttons. I don't think the style has any gameplay purpose, but throughout the course of the game, you'll be collecting these buttons, and for lack of better words, they represent political resources that side has to use. So to start a round, you use your buttons as a means to bid on these cards that I'll show on strategy cards that I'll show you shortly. But then also during the course of a term, you can exchange your buttons for rerolls, because there's going to be plenty of times, as indicated by, as you can imagine, with all these dice, that you'll be rolling dice, and maybe you get a bad roll. Well, you can exert your, let's say, your political currency, as I explained, to try to re-roll and improve your results of whatever die roll that you're trying to do. So that's what these buttons are for. And then there's ways to, of course, through other gameplay effects, to gain buttons throughout the course of the game. So now let's actually get into the cards of the game. This is if you haven't picked up on it already, this is a very asymmetric game. Each side will play very different, and the goals are different for each side. And with that, the cards are different for each side. So the suffragist player will have their own unique deck of playing cards here that I'm pathetically failing to open, and then the opposition has their own deck of cards. And this is where I feel the game provides me a little bit of that Twilight Struggle feel, because on your turn, you will be using up all the cards in your hand, and these cards have different use potential. So just like in a game for Twilight Struggle, you can either use the card for the effect down here and do exactly what it says, or you can use the card for an action, essentially. And as I'm reading now from the rules, but the rules say when playing a card from your hand, you have 4 options. It's either you're playing it for the event that's listed, or you're doing one of 3 actions with it, which is a campaigning action, an organizing action, and a lobbying action. Again, I'm not going to go into detail in this unboxing as to what the different actions are, but in short, these cards are multi-purpose. which provides a lot of then the strategy to the game. As do you want to use the cards for the event, or do you want to use them for one of those actions that I just mentioned? All of these cards, just like in Twilight Struggle, have some sort of historical relevance, and there's flavor text on every card to kind of explain, hey, this is why this card's important, this is why this card's doing what it does. And also something that makes this, I would say, unique in a way too from Twilight Struggle, or similar, I guess, depending on, because I think certain cards in Twilight Struggle might do this. I haven't played that game in a while, but certain cards will, when you play them for their event, will have an effect that lasts a whole turn. So they would go in this box on the board. There's some cards that are in effect for the rest of the game, and then there's cards that will come into effect for final voting, which is the last phase of the full game. So anyway, as I already said, there's different cards for each side. So it's not symmetric at all as to what the cards do for the suffragist player compared to what they do for the opposition player. And something I forgot to mention is that there's also cards that are called state cards, and state cards can be I want to quick double check how you get state cards. I want to say it's once you finally get to 4 cubes in a state of your side, you get the corresponding state card, which are these. Let me double check if I can quickly find this in the rules, where state cards can be claimed when a side has 4 cubes in that state, while strategy cards are claimed either during the strategy phase or via event card play. So yeah, basically you get these cards once you claim the state. So it's like a bonus of getting a bunch of influence in that state. And each of these state cards then are basically an added bonus or an added effect for your side that you can take advantage of. So these are in the game as well, just to add that one more element of tactical thinking. And then I talked about the suffragist cards. These ones are the suffragist cards. Then you have the opposition cards, which again, they basically are more or less behaving the same way as the suffragist cards, except they just have a bunch of different historical events and gameplay effects from suffragist ones. And then finally you have what are called the strategy cards. And strategy cards are are cards that both players technically have access to. And at the start of the turn, there's what's called the strategy. I want to say it's just the strategy. Yeah, planning. No, it is. Yeah, strategy phase, where each player will have the opportunity to basically bid on these cards, and it's a blind bid, so you might end up spending more than you need to, but it's part of another aspect of the strategy in this game is deciding how much you want to invest on trying to claim some of these strategy cards to benefit from them. So, for example, we have this strategy card that says receive 5 buttons, and this one replace an X with 2 cubes or a green check or 1 green check. So yeah, like they're dual purpose. Obviously, the suffragist player would play this card for the first purpose, and then the opposition player, if they got this card, would use it for this purpose. And let's see, this one says your opponent must lose half, rounded up, of their buttons. So obviously the importance of these is going to depend on the game state. So, and therefore, one player at one point in the game might really want to take advantage of one of these strategy cards, and therefore is willing to invest a lot of their buttons to get them. Anyway, it's just another cool aspect of the game, and kind of again represents the abstracts the prioritization of the time of how the suffragist movement was trying their best to I assume influence the key decision makers in the government and in the states as best as they could, given the resources and people they had that were supporting the movement. So the one other thing that I also want to touch on are the OOB Bot cards. So again, I don't want to guess too much as to exactly how the OOB Bot player is managed, but given they have their own deck of cards, I'm going to guess that you basically are going to be drawing probably from the deck of the OOB Bot cards, and simply resolving whatever it is that the deck says or the card says. So in this case, play on turn round 1, add 1 opposition campaigner in the South region, add 1 opposition cube in each state in the Northeast region, the Atlantic and Appalachia region, the South region, and the Midwest region. So, called the Patriarchy. So this is actually a pretty powerful card because it's placing out a lot of cubes, it seems like, on the board right away. But I think that I kind of like the idea of this deck of cards. It looks pretty straightforward for the AI player. Obviously with any AI system, there's kind of the two sides and the two different concerns. One concern is the AI system is too simple and kind of doesn't seem to really have much of a intelligence at all, and therefore it maybe isn't very engaging or interesting. And then the other side of the spectrum is the AI system is overly complex and takes up a ton of time to work through when it's the AI's turn, and then kind of unfortunately sours the gameplay experience. So I think from what I see in these OOB Bot cards, that a nice middle ground approach, I'll say, is taken, which is nice to see. So with that said, I think I covered all the gameplay component aspects of Votes for Women, and now I look forward to playing it. I really think the system does a lot of unique things from other games that I've played. Like I said, it has some similarity to Twilight Struggle, but by no means would I say this is like a retheming of Twilight Struggle. It just gives me that vibe of you're trying to, of course, have political influence on the various states of the board, and like I also said, as much as I, of course, expect the gameplay to be engaging, like this is also an educational game, and I'm saying that in a positive way. I feel like when you hear educational game, it might carry with it a negative connotation, and by no means do I want that to be the case when I say it for this game, because I think it's equally, it looks like it as equally a fun a game as it does educational. And also, I didn't really say this, I don't think, yet, but the component quality itself is well done. Like I really like the dice. They're nothing crazy, but I enjoy rolling dice. So I like how they have all these different types of dice in the game, not just D6s. The wooden cubes and the wooden meeples and campaigners, what I'll say, and the green checks and red checks. Like all those components look very nice. Obviously, they could have gone with cardboard, but I do think the wooden pieces make the game pop out that much more on the table. And same with the tracks down here. And then the big buttons are nice. Again, these could have been a lot smaller, but they're representing buttons, and instead of having like little teeny buttons, these are almost like the size of probably what the actual size buttons may have been like during the suffrage movement. So anyway, guys, that's, I think, all that there is to say at the moment for Votes for Women, again, by Circle Games. So please, again, check out the Rodney Smith how to play video if you want a better understanding of how the game works. I know I glossed over the gameplay aspect, so definitely do that if you are curious how the game works. But also, if you haven't already, definitely like and subscribe. I'm always bad at doing this, but check our QR code here and like and subscribe. Follow our Talking Cardboard YouTube channel, and so that you're notified when I start doing a live playthrough session of this game. I think I will, of course, try to do a solo session with the OOB Bot, and hopefully do either a co-op or a competitive game as well at some point in the near future. And yeah, well, with that said, thanks for those that were tuning in to watch this live, and then for those that watch this unboxing in the future, thanks for watching. Please leave any suggestions or comments you have in the comment section below. Always looking for advice on how to do these unboxings more effectively. And at the end of the day, you know, these aren't meant to teach the game or anything. I just want to show off the game to people that are curious what exactly comes in the box. So thanks so much for watching. Hope to see you guys again soon.